rise and shine.
Rise and shine, chop chop.
Rise and shine.
Rise and shine, it's a beautiful day.
Rise and shine, rise and shine.
Rise and shine.
Rise and shine.
You guys are nerds.
This is exactly what the nerds want.
Our name shall become legend, spoken in hushed tones by nerds across the galaxy.
If you build it, nerds will come.
Nerds must love this place. They think we're a bunch of nerds, and I'll tell you something. I think they're right.
Let the nerds take over.
Let the nerds take over.
Rise and shine, nerds. We hope you've got your coffee because it's time for our brand new morning show for Love Thy Nerd and anyone who finds themselves at the cross section of nerd culture and church culture. I'm Radio Matt. I'm the Director of Content and Resources for Love Thy Nerd.
And I'm Deidra, two-time WWE World Heavyweight Champion.
This week we are talking about church culture and nerd culture, faith and fandom, the godly and the geeky, the most high and the sci-fi. I could go on. Since the 1980s, really before that, but in this specific instance, the church has had a strained relationship with nerds because of an event we have dubbed the Satanic Panic. It was real panic over things like ritual abuse or like kidnapping, Satan worship, magic, things of that nature, that started labeling everything that looked or sounded anti-Christian as satanic. Now, not all fears were illegitimate. At first glance, you could see why some of these things might cause people to take a pause, want to just like, you know what? I'm not sure if this is satanic or not, but it looks like it might be. It sounds like some of the stuff that is. So I'm just going to not even, I don't want to be a part of it kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Which, magic stuff, especially back in the 80s, like today we're a little bit more relaxed about like the fantasy genre, magic kind of thing. But
Right.
But back then I could see how that would be a little bit more concerning for parents. Mm-hmm. One of the things that came under fire was Dungeons and Dragons, which, it's essentially a living board game. You're playing through a story.
Right. But I think just the fact that, just the title made people nervous. Mm-hmm. Dungeons and Dragons.
And see, but
you're not playing that.
That's kind of, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's part of the problem is that neither one of those words are really evil.
That's true.
They just sound evil adjacent. Dungeons? What happens in dungeons? Terrible things. Dragons? They're not real, but they're scary.
I bet too that Dungeons and Dragons specifically, they didn't like that there were die in there. The dice. Because that was, gambling and.
We had Monopoly. I don't think they had problems with Monopoly. But I guess different die, scarier die, 20-sided die.
Like I can remember.
Why do you need so many sides? It's scandalous.
Yeah.
No, I get that, and what started happening was a bit of specious reasoning, and so there were instances where there were people, children, teenagers, who had either taken their own life or taken somebody else's life. And so in examining the behavior of that child after the incident, they learned, well, they played Dungeons and Dragons. And so the specious reasoning was, well, these three people who did terrible things played Dungeons and Dragons. They all have that in common. Therefore, Dungeons and Dragons must be the cause of that. And that kind of reasoning is dangerous because I'm sure they all also brush their teeth. Mm-hmm. So should we stop advocating for oral health? I don't think so. Those kind of things can be, we kind of saw that with the Columbine shooting as well, which happened, when we were teenagers. Mm-hmm. They said, well, they both played, I think it was Call of Duty or something of that nature. They both played that. And so they must have learned their love for, killing people randomly from playing video games. And I mean, I can see where you can draw that conclusion. But it also has no real bearing because there's billions of people who play Call of Duty or other kind of RPG games who have never harmed a fly. So that's kind of where this started. For a good representation of what the prevailing church feeling around D&D was, you need only look at the chick track on the matter that is still in circulation. It's out of print. However, you can still order them in quantities of 10,000 and only 10,000. So they still have plenty of them. That's telling me they have plenty. So it starts, chick tracks, for those of you who don't know, they were like little comic book based tracks, but they are very like hardcore fundamentalist kind of mindset, bordering on the same mindset as like Westboro Baptist Church. Like it's getting real close to that kind of thing. Where like just everything is sending you to hell, essentially, kind of thing. Well, and so, everything is. It's like if you like anything, then it's sending you to hell. So this one actually starts out with a bunch of people playing Dungeons and Dragons, and the dungeon master's like, okay, wizard, cast your spell. And the wizard says, okay, dungeon master, my spell of light blinds the monster. And it kills another character on the board. And in this game, it's like, all right, well, you're dead. Now you have to leave. Get out of here. You can never play again. Like it gets very, they don't do that. You die in the game. They don't make you, all right, get out.
Get out.
Your character's dead.
You lost.
You're never coming back. But after the game, the comic then goes, the dungeon master goes to the girl that cast that spell of light and says, Debbie, your cleric has been raised to the 8th level. I think it's time that you learn how to really cast spells.
Oh my God.
She goes, you mean you're going to teach me how to have the real power? Yes, you have the personality for it now. And it jumps.
Wow.
From them playing, like talking around the table at someone's house, to suddenly they are in this massive room with a giant pentagram on the ground. There's 20 monks dressed in hoods or whatever, and like this ritualistic table. It's the intense occult training through D&D prepared Debbie to accept the invitation to enter a witch's coven.
Oh my God.
So she became Elfstar, the priestess of the craft of the Temple of Diana. Just all this weird stuff. He goes, this is fantastic. This makes the game real. It's not a fantasy anymore. Last night I cast my first spell. This is real power. What did you cast, Debbie? I used the mind bondage spell on my father. He was trying to stop me from playing D&D. What was the result? He just bought me $200 worth of new D&D figures and manuals. It was great.
Wow.
Does this sound like a normal human conversation? And then they go on, and the character whose character died at the beginning, who got kicked out, took her own life because her character was dead, and she couldn't live without her character. And so now we've seen the girl become an occult witch and be responsible for the death of her friend. All because she played D&D.
Wow.
It goes on. She tries to leave the coven and gets like screamed at. And then she finds Mike. Mike is the local Christian guy wearing a school sports jacket saying, I've been praying and fasting for you. Why would you do that for me? Because I know what you're involved in. It's spiritual warfare that you can't win without the Lord Jesus. So it's completely framed as Dungeons and Dragons is 100% your gateway drug to the occult.
Or death.
When in reality, it's much more similar to just acting out a Lord of the Rings novel.
Right.
Or something of that nature, which was around. It was for the 50s, right? I think it was when Lord of the Rings came out. Like, people knew that. Narnia is almost that old as well.
I mean, C.S. Lewis, avid Christian writer.
Yeah.
And
J.R.R. Tolkien as well had a lot of Christian symbolism in his books.
So maybe we need a Dungeons and Dragons Jesus character, and then it'll be okay.
Let's put Father Christmas in one of these.
Oh, this is Christian themed. Okay, that's okay.
Dungeons and Dragons Bible Edition. That's what we need. Those
are always the best
versions of the board game.
I'm sure there's already one out there.
Trivial Pursuit, Dungeons and Dragons, all that. My headphones just went out. Where you at, headphones? There we go. So, friendly reminder, if you see a Chick tract left behind at a gas station or a library or anything, please pick it up and place it directly in the nearest garbage can or lit fire. So, this is the kind of stuff we're going on when we were kids. Do you remember this kind of sentiment that all things like this led to Satanism? Like, we were going, I don't know if you were on the trip or not. I feel like you were, but I don't quite remember. But our youth group was going to a Newsboys concert in, I think it was Amarillo, Texas. And we were like on the way to the concert, and we were like 20 minutes out. And we had to stop and turn around and go home because there were news stories like coming in that massive amounts of Christian protesters were there to protest the rock music that was going to be happening there.
I do not remember that.
You don't remember? I don't think you were on the trip.
Maybe I wasn't on that one.
But yeah, it was this concert. And
wow.
Tad also says I've eliminated 50 Chick tracks. Thank you so much. Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. See, that's even right here. Joshua said that he remembers the one where listening to Christian rock is a sin. Yeah. So even Newsboys was barely Christian rock, really, compared to. I mean, like, now they're like the Christian worship leaders. But back then, their music was a little more weird and a little more rockish. But still, like, they were pretty bland compared to what else was out there, even at the time, Christian-wise.
Right.
And there was just this massive protest against the Christian rock movement because it was satanic. I think Christians have Christians in general, the general Christians, have a bad habit of assuming things that are loud or slightly dark automatically means bad, automatically means sinful.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like the argument against like Christian heavy metal music, where they have like people going, they're like, well, that's how demons talk. How do you know? I don't really think that is how demons talk. I think they talk more sweet.
That's how Hollywood has said demons talk.
All your stuff is based on movies you saw when you were a kid when you weren't supposed to. Like,
my sister was into...
She got me into some of it, yeah.
Like
Rackets and Drapes,
music?
Yeah, like that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I didn't like it just because I felt like I was being yelled at.
I'm just very sensitive. Please stop yelling at me.
Just like, but yeah, I remember her playing it, and I don't think my parents had a problem with it.
No,
I
don't recall that either.
Yeah, I don't remember them going, "You stop listening to that rock music." Yeah.
KY Reddit says the whole ridiculous knee-jerk chick track garbage makes it so much harder to discuss the real dangers of spiritual warfare and playing the actual demonic stuff. Exactly. It's lumped everything into being discerning. I remember, I'm curious if you remember, I don't think we've talked about this since it happened, but as I was writing this, I remembered the dad of one of the kids in the youth group was given permission to take over youth for a week, or maybe it might have been a whole month, where he was talking about, I remember one specific Wednesday, he was talking about all the different companies in America that donate directly to the Church of Satan and how we should avoid all these brands. Do you remember that? It was Mindy's dad.
Really? I don't remember that.
He went on this whole, like, this huge list. And, you know, since then I've researched at least some of those. I'm like, no, they don't. What are you talking about? They have to disclose what they give to. They might give to things that are, you know, not specifically Christian, like things that Christians, you know, are against, but that's all companies really these days. But it's like, well, these are directly, these are all led by Satanists. They're all active in the Church of Satan.
When I remember Disney being a big no for a while.
That was the big boycott from the Southern Baptists. Yeah.
And that was, I think that affected me more than anything else. And I don't even know if, I feel like we still watched Disney movies. It was just like the new ones. But we still had tons of
everything that we had up to then.
VHSs.
We just weren't going to get any more until after this storm passed. But we weren't going to boycott them from our home.
And it could have been my parents just like using that. No, you can't go to the movies. Sorry. It was just their excuse they used, you know, to save some money.
We're out of money. I mean, they're demons.
There's bad.
It's a demon movie.
But I can remember so I recently watched Anastasia, and that was like one of my favorite movies.
Was that a Disney movie?
See, I don't think it was. No, but I feel like it's on Disney.
Is it?
But
I'll look it up while you go.
I remember watching it and loving it and watching it all the time, singing to the songs, because that was my big thing. If it had good music, I loved it.
That was a 20th Century Fox. So it's on Disney now because they bought out 20th Century Fox.
Okay.
But it was not a Disney movie.
But I watched it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is dark. This is really, he legit was, you know, portrayed as a sorcerer, and I think he was in real life, like
the character.
Rasputin was like actually
Rasputin, yes,
bad guy,
yes.
But I remember just loving that movie and watching it, and I watched it recently and I'm like, nope, my kids aren't watching this.
Mosaic Fan Art says the old Disney movies are so much worse. Go back and rewatch Jungle Book. A lot of that was the problem. I think and it's still to this day, the problem that I have with most Disney movies is that they have at least one scene that will be traumatizing to children in every single one of them for some reason. Or maybe not every single one of them, but almost all of them.
Yeah.
But like any movie that I can think of, even like the Pixar movies and stuff, like Inside Out, you got the big scary clown monster thing. Wreck-It Ralph 2, the freaking worst in movie villain of all time, the nastiest conglomerate of zombie Ralphs creating this monster, soulless, eyeless, just seeing his skin crawl. Even like they pause and they're having a conversation with the monster like arm in the background, and they have to keep animating it. So you see it in the background of just all these Ralphs just wiggling together. I'm like, this is disgusting. I hate it so much. I'm sorry. But like Dumbo had the neon like nightmare scene. Like all of those had that kind of thing. So I kind of get that if you were against Disney movies because of that, because they always had to have a traumatizing scene or something terrible in them, yeah, okay, go for it. But if it was for, if it was just because, well, Disneyland has a gay pride weekend, so that's kind of what sparked it. But at the same time, they also had like a Christian Joy concert weekend. Same year, they were just kind of catering to all the different communities, which
everybody
you can understand. But yeah, so let's real quick. In actuality, for anyone not familiar with D&D, it's more akin to two famous, we talked about this, Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings. The only difference is people play through the story themselves. It's a board game. It's also telling the story as you play, in the simplest terms. Now, today you don't really hear that much from the church about how that's giving your soul to Satan. Today, mostly older Christians or those raised in stricter homes, they worry about something else. The fears that D&D triggers antisocial tendencies, violence, suicidal thoughts, things like that. And that's kind of been a major reason Christians avoid tabletop RPGs altogether. Influenced kind of by originally what the fears were, and then just they've never done any more research on it. It's just like, let's block that part off. But in the last 30 odd years, a growing mountain of evidence has continuously and increasingly showed that fear is unfounded. Sarah Lynn Bauman and Andreas Leiberoth report in their survey, Psychology and Role-Playing Games, concerns about potential ill effects of immersion in non-digital fantasy games have largely been dismissed in the research literature. For instance, a casual analysis of suicide statistics does not support the notion that role players as a group have a higher rate of suicide or symptoms related to self-harm. When compared to groups of non-players, no differences have been found in relation to depression, suicidal ideation, psychotic, I can't say this, being psychotic, turning psychotic, extroversion, neuroticism. In fact, instead of encouraging antisocial tendencies, tabletop RPGs can actually serve as a highly effective means of promoting mental, social, and emotional wellness, developing character that is not only healthy, but biblically laudable. So that last bit is actually a quote from Jacqueline Parrish, one of our writers and partners at Love Thy Nerd. For more on D&D, why it's important, how it can be beneficial to church culture, I'd encourage you to visit lovethynerd.com/D, the letter N, D, all letters. And you'll see several articles from Jacqueline as well as a slew of other resources from our amazing content creators. But as I said at the beginning, the concerns aren't always unwarranted, and we will touch on that later this week. But as for this conversation, I think we're going to be wrapping this up. So this week we are talking about church culture and nerd culture, where the relationship between the two broke down and how we can work to repair it. So yesterday we talked about what is considered the kind of the beginning of the split with the Satanic Panic of the 80s and Dungeons and Dragons. In the late 90s and early 2000s, when we were teenagers and kids, I guess a little bit, it was Harry Potter. Now, I haven't read the books. You've read the books, haven't you? Have you not read the books?
No.
Have you just seen the movies?
I've just watched the movies.
For some reason, I thought you'd read the books.
You're thinking of Twilight.
Oh, that's right. You've read Twilight. Yeah, that's something we should burn. So I haven't read the books. I have watched the movies a single time. A couple of them I watched twice because I tried it once and gave up after the third movie, and then came back and forced myself to watch them all, just for the fact that people were mad that I hadn't seen them. I can honestly say that it made me renounce my faith and turn to witchcraft. So then the issue with Harry Potter is similar to D&D, magic and spells being the gateway to actually becoming a witch or a wizard, joining the occult, things like that. And again, this was kind of based on a false premise. People who practice the occult like Harry Potter, therefore Harry Potter must lead to the occult. And no, that's not how any of that works. I think some of the breakdown was some of the spells used in the book were similar to some that are actually spells from some book or whatever, some witchcraft, occult nonsense. But it's not.
That was just good research.
It's not real. Yeah, it's just putting a little bit of realism into what it is. But I don't remember anybody reading Harry Potter and reading it out loud and be like, "Oh, you're a goat now." I didn't mean to do that. It's written in the book, though. That must be a real spell. I don't see how this works. The other issue that people had was Harry had a problem with authority because Harry was always using his magic, I guess, at the beginning of each book and movie against his aunt and uncle that he lives with.
I believe so.
I think it's his aunt and uncle.
But they were turds.
They deserved it. And that's in so many other movies and books that you have no problem with.
Matilda?
So, yeah.
Oh, Matilda was I remember not being allowed to watch Matilda for a while. Yeah.
Was it because of the authority thing, or was it another
No,
reason?
because she used magic.
Oh, I don't read Matilda. No. I'm not a magic person. Okay, none of this is my bag. But it wasn't just the problem was it wasn't just like a don't read these books. It was, this is a threat number one to Christianity. Mm-hmm. And that seems like a bit of an overreaction. Okay. So do you remember when it felt like every prominent church leader was warning against Harry Potter?
I remember it being a very, very big deal, and even locally, book burnings and things, and yeah.
I remember someone brought a flyer to our church to show us that they were doing a Harry Potter book burning. And I remember thinking, even as a young, I'm not sure I was even technically saved yet, but I was still active and still leaning in those directions. And I remember thinking, that's a bit extreme. Why would we do this?
It's a bit much.
But I remember, do you remember going to our pastor's house? He invited all the youth over to his house. And this was his first house here, the one that was still in a neighborhood, before they moved out to the boonies. And he played for us a video that I believe it was James Dobson had recorded. A little mini documentary about how Harry Potter would lead you to joining the occult.
Wow.
Do you remember that at all?
No.
Yeah. No. We watched that, and then we
ignored a lot of stuff.
We watched that, and then we watched a Bible Man episode. All on VHS. KY says the threat is Christian parents not knowing the Bible and understanding real spiritual warfare, training their kids properly, leading in discernment. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about if the concerns are warranted on all these things. So talked about D&D yesterday, talked about Harry Potter today, leading people to worshiping magic or even the devil. Can we say that's never happened? No. I am sure that there have been several kids that have gotten into either of these things that are oriented around magic, and gotten obsessed with the idea of magic and taken it too far. Mm-hmm. But that's everything. Right. I mean, you can take anything too far. And become unhealthily obsessed with it. Yep. Now we know that magic, witchcraft, stuff like that is mentioned in the Bible. We know that there are diviners and witch and stuff mentioned in different stories, even in the New Testament. I think especially in the New Testament. But we also know that all of that stuff is kind of just a facade over just evil. I mean, it's same thing with horoscopes and astrology and all this. It's some sort of weird way that people find themselves connected to something that is anti-God, which is what everybody's looking for, a way to spiritually connect with other people, whether they know it or not. And a lot of people are actively against the idea of that being a Christian or a religious thing, and so they will jump into joining any other kind of group. And I guess religious, I mean Christian religious. So that kind of stuff it definitely exists. It's definitely a problem.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're the kind of person that is going to go down that route, you were going to do that before you watched Harry Potter already. If you're going to go down a route that leads you into those directions, you're already susceptible, and there's going to be a numerous amount of things that you're going to come across in life that's going to take you that direction. So you can't just say, oh, well, he watched Harry Potter and he likes magic now, and it's because he watched Harry Potter that he's doing all these bad things. That's not a fair leap in logic.
And I mean,
at least for a broad spectrum.
Yeah. I know with my kids, you know, we watch something and Eli will say, you know, is that real? And I'm like, no, you know, and just having a conversation with your kid who's reading the book would help. My sister, my niece is very into Harry Potter. And my sister read the books first. So, you know, before her daughter getting into something, she looked into it. And I think that's what you should do as a parent, not just see a news article and be like, oh, now we have to stay away from that. Look into it yourself. And she read them. Now, some of the older books, she didn't let her read right away. But that was not magic. That was teenage lovey stuff that she was like,
the burning of loins.
You're not old enough yet. So
yeah, that's I guess that's a point that I'm glad that you brought up. I don't want anything that we say to be taken as, hey, parents, just chill out and let your kids do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Certainly it is your responsibility to preview anything, especially things that you see them getting semi-obsessed with or things of that nature. Okay, so KY says, I don't agree that someone for whom those things would be a gateway would already be inclined in that direction. I didn't mean that the inclination would be specifically to that direction that they ended up in. I meant that their inclination is to seek something to belong to, and if they are avoiding Christianity, then they're going to fall into whatever the first thing that entices them is. The inclination is for that community, but outside of, you know, a community of faith. Not necessarily that
specific.
that would automatically end in magic without having been exposed to magic or something like that. That's not what I meant. I apologize if that's how that came across. Thank you for helping me fix that. Mosaic Fan Art says, as parents of kids who are now 28 and 22 through 22, we had a lot of discussion about magic, witchcraft, and told our kids that once they're old enough to know truth versus fiction, they can watch and choose for yourself, and that age was different for all children. Absolutely. Yes, that, you know, it's you got to tailor make that kind of stuff for your kids as well. So like right now, I wouldn't let our kids watch Harry Potter, but I also wouldn't really let them watch Lord of the Rings. Narnia we're getting into just with the books at the moment, but even that could be a little intense.
I did, the language in Narnia is so old that I'm like,
there's curse words up in there by accident, because they weren't really curse words back then when
I was like,
C.S. Lewis was writing.
I'm gonna edit this a little bit. And just some of the stuff, I'm like, what does that mean? Like it's such an old phrase that I don't even know what it means.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's I don't think it's right to say that because something bad is possible as a result of being exposed to something, that means that it itself is necessarily bad. Because my kind of point was, you can overdo anything and it becomes sinful in your life. And so it comes down to personal responsibility. Once you become of a reasonable age, it comes down to keeping tabs on your own soul. Like, you can tell if something's, normally, at least anyway, you can tell if something's leading you in a negative direction in your life. Like if I would say that there's quite a few people that have played D&D who get uncomfortable with it, and that's perfectly okay. If you play D&D or you watch Harry Potter and you're like, you know what, this kind of stuff does make me spiritually uncomfortable, listen to that and for yourself stay away from it. That doesn't mean you need to then go try and ruin it for everybody else because their spiritual convictions might not be the same as yours. If God's convicting you that, hey, this probably isn't good for you, it's probably because you might have a tendency to go down that negative route if you keep doing it. And that is perfectly legitimate, and you should 100% listen to where the Spirit leads you.
I would say that would be like alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, some people can have a drink and be fine and be done with it. And then others, you know, God might say, you know, you need to not do that. You need to stay away from that object because I know you and I can see this going bad for you, you know?
Right. I made you. I've seen the tendencies you've grown into. Hey, maybe don't do this.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of that is also trying not to be a stumbling block to your Christian brothers and sisters as well. But there's a limit to how much of that responsibility is on you too. Like if you're having a get together and y'all are going to play D&D or you're going to watch Harry Potter tonight or whatever, it's kind of up to you. Like, all right, I'm not going to go. Not like, I'm going to go, but I'm not going to participate. And then I'm going to make y'all feel bad about doing it. That's the different thing. You're being a stumbling block to me. No, you didn't have to come. You didn't have to be here. I don't know what that is, so I'm not going to worry about that. That's not about anything that we're talking about. Okay. Let's, going back to Harry Potter, the Christian allegory here that, there's actually quite a few Christian allegories, especially in the 7th book when it came out. Harry, aka the Chosen One, willingly went to his death to save humanity, and then Harry is resurrected in order to deliver the ultimate salvation here. The final chapters of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows are a resurrection story that parallels the one that is being celebrated all over the world today, showing Harry as a Christ figure within a hero narrative. And in fact, we see the story of Christ in so many different sci-fi adventures and nerdy properties and things. Like it's hard to escape that story. It's hard to escape the Jesus story because it is one that permeates pretty much our soul, I think. Even people that don't intend to put that story in there, we see Jesus shining through in different things. That's why there's so many books that are like Finding God and, you know, this series, Finding God in this series. You can find biblical truth anywhere that truth exists, because all truth is God's truth. If it's true, it has to be of God. And so you can find these kind of things in places that people didn't even intend for them to be there. So it really comes down to personal responsibility, parental responsibility, and just kind of in the end, not being a turd about everything. You don't got to be a turd about everything, man. A book burning, essentially, you know, book burning, boycotts, and all this kind of stuff. Those are above and beyond the message that we're trying to send. That's telling the people that like the stuff, we don't care about like you. Right. It's not making the point that we want it to make. Right. It's making the opposite point, that we are against you because you like these things. Yeah. And that's not something that we want to do as believers. We don't want to build walls where there need not be walls. We can build, fences, see-through fences around things that we don't want to be exposed to or expose our children to. But that at least won't cut off any possibility of communication. It won't cut off the ability to love other people, love our neighbors. A fence, not a wall. It's the difference between a chain link fence between your neighboring, two houses, you and your neighbor, and an 8-foot cinder block wall.
Right.
Like, do I want them in my life? Do I want to be able to talk to them? Do I want to be able to love on them? Or do I want to pretend they don't exist and that I am in my own little castle? Please don't talk to me.
Right.
Any final thoughts there?
Didn't Jesus talk to was it Paul about, don't separate yourself out.
I think so, because it's Paul that
the Gentile, like
yeah, it's Paul that went on to say, like, I became a Jew to the Jews. I became someone under the law for those that were under the law, so I could show them Jesus. I became all things to all people, essentially,
right.
So I could bring more of them into the fold. Yeah,
right.
So we're actually going to talk on that point here later in the week. So we will keep going with that. This week we are talking about church culture and nerd culture, where the relationship between the two broke down and how we can work to repair it. We're talking about the church uprising against D&D. We did that on Monday. Harry Potter was on Tuesday, and there's actually an older event that wasn't sparked by the church, but it was certainly expanded by it. This was in the mid-50s. Society was starting to have problems with comic books. There was too much blood, too much gore, scantily clad females, usually in a jungle somewhere. There was no real regulations keeping kids from buying comics with adult content. So the Comics Code Authority was established in 1954. Dr. Frederick Wortham's book, Seduction of the Innocent, accused all comics of promoting delinquency and disregard for authority in children. He made this conclusion by asking young delinquents if they read comics, to which many responded yes. Again, it's that specious reasoning of, well, all of you have this one thing in common, so it must be the problem. Mm-hmm. At the time, comics were so common and widespread for children that this would be like asking a kid in America today if they know what an iPad is.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So at the time, there was also a series of Senate hearings on the relation of comics to crime, but they did not arrive at the conclusion that comics caused more crime. However, apparent protests, involvement of the Catholic Church, and general fearfulness around how media influenced children caused the creation of the self-censorship body, the Comics Code Authority. So this caused the major comics producers, including Marvel and DC Comics, as well as publishers like Archie Comics, to create their own self-governing body to make things kid-friendly. It wasn't really like a rating system. Like there wasn't like, this is okay for up to this age and up to this age. It was just like, you have to have this seal of approval on your comic book. So it would be on the cover. It'd be this little stamp that said approved by the Comics Code Authority.
Okay.
If you wanted your comics in comic shops, you had to have that seal because comics came from third-party distributors back then. They wouldn't ship those comics if they didn't have the seal on them.
Wow.
Okay. But in the 2000s, it became more and more common for publishers to ship directly to comic shops instead, going around the distributors. And so publishers slowly started abandoning the Comics Code Authority. DC and Marvel were among some of the last to hold on to it. But as of 2011, Archie Comics was the final publisher, and they put the final nail in the coffin when they announced they were going to be leaving the Comics Code Authority as well.
Wow.
So since then, comics are certainly more lax, but usually the more adult comic books are at least marked 18 plus or like kept on high shelves or something. There's usually something to at least distinguish the more adult comics. Mm-hmm. But this does remind me of the rise of the rating systems on TV and video games that happened when we were kids. Do you remember when that started coming up?
I thought they were already on there.
Really?
That was when we were kids.
No, like we had, I think the video games one came first. I don't remember. They were very close to each other. Mm-hmm. But I remember when video games started having ratings on them. And I'm pretty sure it was around the time the N64 came out. Maybe slightly before that. But there were more and more more video games with adult content in them, or some of them had varying levels of violence. And so they had labels for like early childhood, E for everyone, which I think originally was K through A, kids through adults. They eventually added everyone 10 plus to it. And then they had I think it just jumped straight to mature. There might've been a middle one in there, but I remember that being a new thing. Like, it was in the corner of every cover of the video game, a Blockbuster or Hollywood Video or whatever. And the TV show stuff was, I also remember that coming into place. Like, there were no ratings on TV shows. And then all of a sudden we had, Y, TVY, TVY7, TVY4 or TV14, all those things. And then like the little descriptors of why they're rated this way. We've got violence or fantasy violence or things of that nature.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat also helped. Yeah. Mortal Kombat was a big driver of those rating systems for video games. Oh gosh. And they're still to this day. I watched the trailer for the new Mortal Kombat that's coming out, and it is the goriest thing I've ever seen from that franchise. There's one, I'm not even going to describe it. It's so terrible. I love the Mortal Kombat series, but I really could do without the hyper-realistic gore of the later series here. Just, it's a bit much. Having just like a spray of blood from a 2D avatar back in the original ones where you're just fighting, flatly. Like, that wasn't nearly as bad as just like crushing someone's skull through their eyes or something like that. Like, it's gross stuff that they're doing. Gross. Still love me some Sub-Zero though. So is it a bad thing? Like, is it a bad thing to have ratings systems?
No, and that I would say it's more for the parent again to know. I know that Eli is getting into comic books, and he has those the encyclopedia that just like
we got the
pictures.
He's got both of those encyclopedias,
and I'm like, some of these ladies need to.
That's for the pretty
better
standard
uniform.
thing. Yeah.
And that's what I don't like about the comics is the ladies wear. Yeah. For my impressionable 9-year-old,
Yeah, I
that's
get that.
just a bit much. So
it's a bit much, or a bit not enough. Yeah, I think it's a reasonable thing to have ratings. I know there's always been this argument of it's kind of like censorship. It's putting a blockade against art. Like, and
if you want a 9-year-old to watch what you're making, make it appropriate for the 9-year-old.
Right. But that's the idea. It's always been censorship versus protecting children. And so I know when we were like just married, there was a company called Clean Flicks where they would sell, they would take DVDs, they would edit out all the bad stuff. Like edit out the cuss words, edit out everything. And then they would sell the edited version of those DVDs. Now everyone was upset about that because that was, first of all, now you're selling the movie and you're making the money from the movie. Like, you're not giving any of that money to us. So totally get that. But they were more upset that they were altering the artwork of the director or the creator or whatever. The same thing arose with VidAngel. Now, VidAngel still exists, and you can still use it, I think, right now only on Netflix, where you can stream something through VidAngel. You still have to have a Netflix account, though, and then you have to have a VidAngel account. And the VidAngel will cut out all the swear words or to whatever level you don't want to see or hear things, so you can watch that cleanly. But they started out trying to do that with every streaming service, or have a streaming service of their own similar to Cleanflix. And I can see the problem with that. You want to protect children, you want to watch things that are appropriate, or you want to show them something that you love, but you don't want them to see like something you didn't know was in there. Like that's the thing that we had this when we were kids. It was called watching a movie that was played on TV because they cut everything out because they had to make it fit for TV. And so we recorded it in our VHSs, and that was the version of the movie that we knew.
Yep.
And then we grew up and we watched the movie and we're like, I don't remember all these F words.
Whoa, that's not
what did Sam Jackson just say? I thought he said monkey flipping. What is happening here? So
I remember that liar.
Liar, liar. Yeah.
Liar, liar. My parents had it recorded on the VHS.
Had a lot of sexual jokes and cuss words in that movie, too.
All kinds of inappropriateness had been taken out of it.
And so we kind of, as parents ourselves now, our generation, wants to have that option, but we don't anymore because that doesn't happen. There are no movies played on TV that you're watching anymore. Who has cable anymore? Very little people. Only people that like sports. Right. And even then, most TV channels that are playing movies are either dedicated to playing movies, and so they don't have to follow a rating system.
Right. They're
not on, basic cable or whatever. Or if they are on basic cable, they're just going to play it after 10 p.m., and then play whatever they want. So you can't even get the censored versions anymore, I don't feel like, aside from just a few certain things. My dad watched Saving Private Ryan on TV last night. I was like, what year is it? I mean, how do you censor that? That's like... I downloaded a version. Somebody had edited the original Deadpool movie, so it didn't have. Was it 2 minutes long? Yeah, that's exactly what everybody said. It was like, okay, so you watched a 15-minute movie then, because what else could you have done? I mean, I enjoyed it. It was fun. But that even wasn't that long ago. And I remember everybody getting real upset about that movie coming out. Mm-hmm. Like even we at Back Row Online back then, we were like publishing a thing like, hey, parents, Deadpool's not like every other superhero movie. Don't take your kids to Deadpool.
Right.
And I still stand by that. But like now, I feel like there's tons of kids that have already seen it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's such we didn't do a good job there. We shouldn't be, we shouldn't be normalizing this kind of stuff. And so we've had more and more superhero movies that have come out that are a little bit more adult, testing those waters a little bit more and more.
Yep.
It's difficult to not want that kind of censorship. So from that standpoint, as a believer who is raising his kids and who doesn't want his kids to be influenced by the negative aspects of the stuff, but also doesn't want our kid to miss out on everything. Mm-hmm. I have those same problems, those same desires, I think, that parents had when all these other things in the past were coming up. The comic books, the Dungeons & Dragons board game kind of thing, video games, all this stuff, as Harry Potter, as all this stuff has come out and become very popular, especially among children. You have that desire of like, look, if they love the stuff, I want them to play it, but I also don't, or, see it, do it, whatever. But I also don't want them to get sucked in by it or get exposed to inappropriate stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I can kind of sympathize with the idea of, let's just ban that stuff full out.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we don't even have to worry about it.
Right.
It might be a bit of a lazy approach to it because at that point, you're not doing your research. I think you're just like, if it even touches on that, let's out of here. But we have the idea of you and I watching movies before we let our kids watch it. And I think that's the right move because there have been a couple that we've seen. We're like, you know what? I don't think this is appropriate.
Yep. And I'm sad that we have to do that with children's movies as well.
Even children's TV series nowadays because they want to sneak a lot of stuff in.
Yep. So
which
gotta pre-watch.
We don't really have to do. You don't really have to do that with the children's stuff. It's okay.
But I'm pretty sure
to it as they get older. So much more.
I'm pretty sure Eli's probably the only third grader now going into fourth grader who hasn't watched a superhero movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he hasn't seen any of the Marvel movies.
All his friends have seen all the Marvel movies, and
the only one he's seen is Into the Spider-Verse. He hasn't seen MCU. He's seen Into the Spider-Verse and Teen Titans Go to the Movies, and he loves both of those. But I can't even let him watch the new Into the Spider-Verse yet because it's got cursey words in it. Yeah. And I'm like, why? You didn't have any in the first one. And it was perfectly fine. You didn't need to do this. I don't understand. This is clearly a movie for kids.
Yeah. It's that line of, oh, we want to appeal to adults. And that means add curse words. Why?
Yeah. Well, also, why is that what appeals to adults?
Right.
I don't understand.
Why is it going to make my movie experience better if you say the F word all through it. How does that help me?
Also, that just reminds me of those movies that it's nothing but the F word. The first one that comes to mind is the Felum 1, 2, 3. It was like that John Travolta movie.
That.
The underground tram system or whatever being taken over. And it was like every other sentence was just littered with the F word. I mean, they said it like 87 times each scene. And I'm like, I can't follow the dialogue. I'm being assaulted every 5 seconds. I don't understand the necessity. This doesn't make it more real for me.
Yeah. I can enjoy a movie without the curse words. Yeah.
Oh, man. I remember coming out of the theater for Deadpool and immediately ran into a ladies group from our church going, "What did you see?" Is the Passion of the Christ playing? I think
the same one you're going to see.
What did you see? Courageous? Yeah, that's what I came out of. I'm pretty sure. Prayer Closet? Oh, what was that movie about the prayer closet?
Prayer Warrior.
No, it was the lady that had the prayer closet. It's like there was a marriage, it was falling apart, but their mom or...
Yeah, it wasn't a Prayer Warrior.
It wasn't Prayer Warrior, was it? War Room.
There we go.
Thank you, Jamie. See, you're not all bad. So bottom line, Christians want to experience the same things, but at the same time, they want to protect their families. So fearing things like D&D and Harry Potter that has magic, spells, and monsters, it's hard to blame us sometimes for going overboard. But fear is always the driving force. That's the problem. It's always based on fear, which then where it crosses the line is when they turn that fear into like a self-righteous thing. So that's when we get to the book burnings, and that's when we get to the chick tracks and things like that. Fear shouldn't be the driving force. But when you get to that self-righteous point, it then becomes, it doesn't become like, is this, morally okay? Is there any value to this? It becomes, I present myself as morally right. How can you argue against me and God, by the way, in my corner? And when you face somebody who likes Harry Potter, plays D&D or whatever, and you have that mindset about what they like, that's all that you're thinking of, and that's all you're responding to. You're not thinking about their soul. You're not thinking about their salvation. You're not thinking about fellowship with that person. You're not thinking about bringing them into the fold. You're thinking about, hey, you are a sinner because you like that thing, and you're going to hell. So just thought you should know, and walk away.
Right, because that's what Jesus did, right? He went around and he said, you're bad. You need to stop this before I'm friends with you.
The only people that Jesus talked to that way directly were the religious people. Just for the record. Now, when he spoke to crowds, sometimes he would be, more straightforward. But when it was a one-on-one thing, the only people that he ever called vipers, got up in their face, flipped their tables, were the religious people doing the things they weren't supposed to be doing. The people that were lost, and the people that were, into, this debauchery or that, he talked to as people and showed them a better way. So let's do that, hey? This week, we are talking about church culture and nerd culture, and all week, we've been talking about the times when the two were at odds, and we've done our best to give both sides the benefit of the doubt. And now that we've covered the problems, we kind of want to talk about how things are changing. We are seeing a more broader shift to the church at large being a little bit more welcoming towards nerd culture in general. There are still pockets of people that have problems with, D&D, Harry Potter, and stuff like that, basically brought from the past and just never really updated. They've never really taken a second look or a harder look or anything like that. And that's understandable. But it is time to kind of make some of those changes. And the problem ultimately with most of these situations in the past is that it has alienated people from church culture. people that enjoy tabletop gaming, people that enjoy, Harry Potter or any other sci-fi thing, they have been labeled by the church as essentially that being their personality. That's who they are as a person, and we don't want those people here, kind of thing. Whether that was the intention or not, that's how it becomes. That's how people who love those things see it. They're like, okay, well, they don't like that, which means since I like that, they don't want me there.
All they've seen of Christianity is them speaking out against the thing that they love.
Right. And so while we're trying to fix that, we're also trying to open doors. And so one of the ways that some churches are doing that is hosting game nights. And not just like Uno and Monopoly game nights, but like newer games, tabletop games. Some even actually have like D&D or D&D-like campaigns. There's actually a lot more tabletop role-playing games now than just Dungeons and Dragons. All different themes, so you can play plenty of them that don't have any magic or dragons in them. That they're space themed or some other kind of thing. These exist now, and that I think is opening the door a little bit more to like, okay, well maybe it's just a style of game and not a gateway to the occult and Satanism itself.
Right.
Game nights, I think, historically in the church have been more focused on children and families with children, as opposed to just like adults coming and playing games together. Which is why I think it's been mostly Uno and Monopoly. It's been like Boggle and things like that. Clue if you're lucky, but there's a lot of murder in that, so maybe not. I remember that being a problem. Like someone donated Clue to Highland, our church. And I don't know if it's still in there or not, but I remember people being like, isn't this whole game about murdering people? I don't think we want that in the church.
I don't know if it might be. I recently was like with the kids and they all wanted to play Clue. And I'm like reading the instructions to the kids who didn't know how to play before. And I'm like, geez, am I going to get in trouble playing this with the kids?
Killed him with a knife, bludgeoned him with a candlestick.
Like,
family-friendly fun.
Oh, dear.
But I really kind of think that this started with our generation's youth groups. Like this kind of opening up. Our youth groups, the generation that we're from, which I guess is millennials, it's like early millennials. That's when youth leaders were like, okay, we're going to build devotionals and sermon series or whatever and use like video games and these other kind of things as ways to open that door. Jam Brady, last church game night, we played Secret Hitler, and it was wild to just hear "You're a fascist" echo through the halls. I've watched people play Secret Hitler. I'm like, yeah, that's a game that people around you really need to understand what's happening, or they're gonna be like, "What's happening? Why does everyone want to be a liberal? I don't understand here." No, okay. What kind of weird political conversation are they having over there?
What the one
someone
we used
called
to play?
Someone Hitler.
What was that one with the cards and you're like, and one of you's a murderer and they like leave the room and you're like,
the cards.
Yeah,
I'm sure I know what you're talking about.
King or something, you were the murderer.
Mafia?
Mafia,
Mafia?
yeah,
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Mafia, which is what Among Us is kind of based on. I'm slow. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would play that in youth group all the time.
Yeah, we'd play Mafia.
All the time.
That's right.
And I felt a little funny. I was like, what's this game called?
So this started, I think, like I said, with our youth groups, and I think it's grown with us. And now as adults, we're like, we kind of feel this weird pressure in the church to like, okay, well, maybe I'm not supposed to like those things anymore because I'm an adult now. That's just for the youth. But that's not really the case. And the youth groups don't really, they're already on to something else. Like the stuff that we've grown up with, we want to play these games now with other adults that are our age.
Right.
And I think that's happening more and more often. I know that's happening at the church where LTN has their office, which is Matt Warmbier and Luke Filipiak's church. They have an LTN sponsored game night, I think once a month or maybe every 2 weeks. And they got a ton of people that just come and play, and they're mostly adults, and they just come and play games like that. We are here at our church going to be trying our second attempt to start one of these, because the first attempt, everyone's like, what? I don't want to come play Uno with a bunch of kids. And that's not what this was. And I don't think you realize that. So we're going to try again. We had one person show up. We played, me, my wife and her played a game. It was all right. But that was weird. But we're going to try again. We're going to attempt again. We're going to bring food. Baptists love food, right?
There we go. Yeah. That was the thing. We didn't have food last time.
Yeah. I can order that food. Don't let me forget. So anyway, it's beyond, pizza night stuff. This is like, you gotta devote some real time to foster that part of your community, because it's actually probably a larger part of your community than you think. I think COVID was played a big hand in bringing more church people into kind of like a digital world.
Definitely.
For a little while.
Oh,
I think more people who don't normally play video games played some video games during this time. And I think it was a perfect time too, because Animal Crossing had just come out. And that's such an easy to pick up and easy to learn game for a newbie that everybody on the planet was like, all right, let's buy a Switch and buy some Animal Crossing and just, look, let's sell some turnips this Sunday.
I get to talk to animals without a mask on. Look at that.
They had masks you could wear in the game too.
Oh, I know. See, on my little Pocket Camp one, like a lot of people went to masks. That was
so
like
weird. This is who we are now.
It's like,
this is what we do now.
I'm playing on this to escape that world.
So in a larger sense, there are also mission groups that focus directly on nerd subcultures. I know one that I was really surprised to learn about at the first LTN Con was a group called Jesus Otaku. And this is Christians who are into like Japanese subculture, so anime and everything that comes with that. Read manga books and things of that nature. And so the Saddleback Church has the Jesus Otaku ministry that, they go to anime conventions or whatever, or they have, groups that share their love for that as well as their love for Jesus at the same time. It's neat. I like that. And there's more and more groups like that featured, focusing on different subcultures. But more of them are going to like conventions as well. And Love Thy Nerd, of course, is one of them that likes to go to conventions. Now we go in a bit of a different capacity. When Love Thy Nerd goes to a convention, it's not to set up our own booth and pass out Bibles or things of that nature. We get in with other booths. We go to volunteer at, like Funko or other booths that are showcasing games, and we learn the games, and we then get to teach people that come up to the booth to play the games. It's about building community, building fellowship, and they then learn that we're from a ministry called Love Thy Nerd, and they get to build a relationship with us before they realize, hey, we're also here to show you the love of Jesus. But at that point now, they like us. They're not automatically turned off by the fact that, oh, this is a ministry. No, thank you. And they walk away. It's fellowship is a key aspect of sharing the gospel. And again, that comes back to what we talked about with Jesus yesterday. We talked about how Jesus would go into the homes of people who were sinners, people who were, involved in things that, the normal people didn't want people to be involved in, or the things that the religious people saw as, sinful. He would go into their homes and he would befriend them and he would have dinner with them. And that changed the mindset of anybody who would never give a Pharisee the time of day, would never give, one of the religious leaders of those times, their ear for a second.
Right.
And so that's kind of what we're doing here as well, is like we're building those bridges, we're building those connections long before we ever get to spiritual matters, because by the time we do get to spiritual matters, it's actually going to mean something to you. Even if you don't wind up believing, even if you don't, come to Christ or anything based on anything, you're more willing to have that conversation or know that you can ask us about that kind of stuff without it being awkward or weird, without any obligation.
Right.
And you're more than likely willing to actually take what, we would say into account. to trust it a little bit more, which I think is something that we're having to relearn as Christians all the time.
Yeah.
When we think about like talking about the protesters at the Newsboys concert that protested us away from even getting to go see it, how many people did they save with that protest?
Right.
How many people did they like, you know what, I got to check this Christianity stuff out? Nobody. Nobody. I almost guarantee it. If they did, I don't know what kind of weird psychopath that person was. I'm not saying God can't use situations like that. Obviously, God can do whatever he'd like. And if he wants to use that opportunity to somehow get you into thinking about becoming a Christian, I mean, I'm sure there are at least a handful of instances, but there's got to be so many more of the opposite of, churches being loving and caring for people. Like you see, I think you see this at, I've seen this at I haven't seen it, but I've seen stories about this at San Diego Comic-Con. There's usually two types of Christians outside. There's the Christians with the signs and the protests and the end is nigh kind of Christians. And then there's the Christians that are like, hey, you want some water? We got some food. We got, come on, you're standing in line all day. Here, take a bottle of water. Here's a granola bar or whatever. And if you want to come talk to us, we'd love to be here, for you at any time. Those are the two different kinds of mindsets: loving people, and shouting at people.
I remember when Pokemon Go became big, a bunch of churches were hotspots for it,
and a lot of them loved it.
Yeah, there were so many that would just bring snacks out to these people in their cars.
Because they just come and sit in the parking lot.
Yeah. And they loved it. They weren't upset. And that's,
It's fantastic. Yeah, it was, I don't know if the people behind Pokemon meant to do that as a way for churches to be involved, but I think it was really cool. I mean, we even posted an image on our Facebook. Like, hey, did you know we're a gym?
Yeah.
Come check us out.
Yeah. And there's several times, like, someone's sitting in our parking lot even now, and I'm like, oh, they're probably just playing Pokemon Go.
That was more common a few years ago, that's for sure. Yeah, they're just playing Pokemon. Don't worry about them. They're not here to hurt us. So I think that we're starting to see that nerds who thought that they weren't welcome at church are getting a little bit more comfortable in a lot of churches.
Yeah.
More comfortable with the idea. We got Hector Mirai with his Faith and Fandom ministry, which is what he's been doing since, I think, 2013 or earlier. 2013, I think, is when he started writing his first book. But it's, he hosts Geek Church at a lot of conventions that he goes to. So there's like a Sunday morning service that he gets to host right there at the convention. And it's usually got plenty of people there. And I'm like, that's really cool. Yeah. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people would think about. Little blessings like that. One of the things I think LTN used to do, I don't know if they still do these. I haven't seen them in a while, but they used to carry around little stat cards. And so it would get you like an experience point in a game, like a +1 kind of thing. Oh. And they're carrying around little stat cards, and they would say things on the back like, this is a cool costume that you have on, something like that. And just give them a little boost of, self-esteem with this little pointless, cheap card. But, they're going to keep that. They're going to keep that. Someone said, I came dressed as the Joker or whatever, and someone gave me this saying my costume was cool. Yeah. They're going to put that in their little wall of stuff. They're going to keep that from the convention. Right. And they're going to have the little Love Thy Nerd logo right there. Right. Eventually, they're going to go search out what Love Thy Nerd is. And whether that comes to anything or not, who knows? But it's more likely to with that, reminder than it is without it. It's more likely to with the kindness than it is if they got a Chick tract handed to them on the outside by, a protesting group of Christians. Right. That's going to go in the trash. Right. So what you going to do? I think my church had like 4 Pokemon Go hotspots on campus at launch. Yeah, it was really neat. It was really neat. So I think we really need to start looking a little bit more for God in nerd culture, seeing how God can move in these communities and how we can minister to these communities. We got to stop with the picketing, and we got to do more joining in. One of the ways we can do this is by building bridges between actual churches and the nerd culture they're reaching out to. And we are this year in November, we're hosting NCMS, Love Thy Nerd, and Lux Digital Church, along with partners from many other ministries. We are hosting the Nerd Culture Ministry Summit, which exists to build bridges between church culture and nerd culture by equipping church and ministry leaders with tools, resources, and training to better love and serve their nerdy neighbors locally, digitally, and beyond. So we would invite you to actually be a part of this. This is a new thing that we hope becomes a big yearly tradition and moves all over the country and then maybe in other parts of the world in the future. This is our first one, and we'd invite you to go find out more and sign up at ncmsummit.com. So let's see what our Twitch chat has to say before we wrap up here. I think it's just been J.A. Reedy here for the last few, so I think we're caught up on him. It's pretty genius, using Pokemon Go as a way to get people to come to your church, all that kind of stuff. Community game nights, again, I want to go back to that. Community game nights are a great way to get people that are at least church adjacent to start coming to your church, even if that's the only event that they come to. It's a start, It's a start. It's a way to minister. It's a way to have fun, and it's a way to show that you care about them. So if you are looking for a way that your church can start to minister to nerds in your local area, in your community, I would recommend that being the place to start. Advertise it on Facebook, invite a bunch of people, and bring people together. Yeah. That's how we got to do this. It brings the community together. Absolutely. And that's kind of something churches, I think, in general lack. It's something we've talked about in our church recently about how when churches are put in communities, they're supposed to minister to that community around them.
Yeah.
But more and more churches have people just coming from different parts of town and whatever, and you don't invest in that local area. Invest in that local area. Go out, put a little flyer on everybody's door saying, hey, we're having a game night. No pressure. Come hang out. We'll have food. We'll have fun.
Yeah.
This that kind of stuff. Tell them to bring their games. They might have something fun. Play some Wingspan. They could lead some sort of campaign. Who knows? Code names. Code names is easy. Everyone likes code names.
I don't like code names.
Do something. Why don't you like code names?
It's too much thinking.
Too much thinking?
Yeah.
You don't like using your brain? How do you connect these three words without connecting another word?
To relax. That is not relaxing to me at all.
It is a lot of pressure. I'll say that. Thank you for joining us for Rise and Shine, nerds. We want to invite you to get behind the scenes by joining our LTN Discord community. Once you've joined over at lovethynerd.com/Discord, simply go to the channels and roles section and click on Rise and Shine Nerds to gain access to it. You can help us plan shows and segments and even be on the show yourself on occasion. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app or through the Love Thy Nerd YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. And tell us what you think of the show via our socials at Rise and Shine LTN on Facebook and Twitter. Once again, I'm Radio Matt.
I'm Deidra.
And as always, a reminder.
Jesus loves you, nerds.